so we're checking out your assignment 8 turn-in. Right off the bat, there's some funny business going on with your cameras here. So we'll take a look at that. I'm just going to hit space bar in my scene window so that we can see all of our different views. Alright, you can see this one is kind of tilted at an angle. Alright, we're looking at it kind of in between the top and the front right now. Alright, and this one down here is actually set to the exact same angle. It's set to the same camera. So anytime I change this one's going to change too. Alright, these two are set to the same camera. So we're going to change that. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and come up to panels here. And I'm going to choose orthographic top for this one. Alright, so we're now looking at this from the top, but this is quite large. This is a huge scene, alright? So our grid is kind of making it a little difficult to see. So let's turn off our grid. It's this little button right here. Alright, no more grid. Now we can kind of see what's going on a little better. But still, it's a little hard to see because this is all in wireframe. So we also may want to turn on this button right here. Alright, smooth shade all. Now we can kind of see what's going on a little better. But even better than that, we can turn on this button here called texture. Now we can see our texture just like we can over here. Alright. Now this one, I want to be my front view. Okay, so I'm going to come down here to panels, orthographic front. Looks like it's already in front view, okay, but we're looking at it from the top. Just click on this little arrow right here at the bottom of this little viewfinder. When we do that, we'll switch to a front view. There we go, now we can see it from the front. Again, we want to turn on the smooth shade all button. And we can turn on our texture too if we want to. And then the last one over here should be a view from the right side, which it is, okay? But again, it's a little difficult to see what's happening because of the grid, because the scene is so large, okay? So let's turn off the grid right here. And we'll turn on our shading right here and our texture, okay? So now we can see in several different views what's happening a little better, okay? Now I'm going to focus actually mainly on my perspective view here. So I'll just hover my mouse over this area and press space bar to make this my main view. So okay, let's take a look at the actual animation now that we have our cameras all fixed up. So when we watch this, you know, right away at the beginning we can see this cube is kind of intersecting with the plane here, so like the ground, you know. So it's starting kind of underneath the ground. It's bouncing down, falling under the ground further, and then it's shrinking quite a lot. Okay, so this actually is not the same as squash. All right, so shrinking is very different from squash, and I will go ahead and explain why now. So I'm just gonna put a couple of little things in the scene here. I'll put in a sphere. Why not? I'll just scale that up a little bit, and then I'll duplicate it and put in another one. You don't have to do this in your scene, just, you know, kind of watch. I'm just going to show you the difference between squashing and shrinking. So, if I take this sphere, alright, I'll show you an example of shrinking here, alright. So if I just pull it in like this, you can see that this sphere clearly has less volume inside of it. It can contain less than this one, which is bigger, right? Okay, so this one is shrunk. And this one, if I squash it down, This one, you know, it might look a little bigger than that one still, but this one has also actually shrunk, okay? And I'll create another sphere to kind of show you what I mean. I'll just make a bunch of them. Here we go. Alright, so that one I've only squashed in one direction, okay? So that one actually has also shrunk. So you have to kind of picture this as maybe like a water balloon, alright? So let's say this is full of water, okay? And if we just kind of push it down in one direction, you can see that this clearly looks like it will hold less water than this, right? Right. Okay. So, you know, and then also, of course, too, if we just scale it down and do what we did with the first one, this obviously will also hold less water than this, alright? So the idea behind squash and stretch is that we really want to keep the same volume of our object, the same mass, right? It should never shrink. It should just change shape, okay? While still retaining that same size value, okay? So to do a proper squash, we'll want to squish this down in one direction, alright? But we're not done there, of course. We also need to stretch it out in the other two directions to make up for squashing it in one direction, alright? So, if we come over here, actually I'll go ahead and do a little freeze transformations first before I get too into this. So everything's nice and clean. Again, don't worry too much about that right now. This is just for a demonstration. Alright, so I'm squishing this down. You can see I have this scale Y value of 0.438. That means whenever I take one of these down, the other two are going to have to be larger numbers, alright? So rather than having these at 1, which is their default, I'm going to put them at a higher number, like 1.4, okay? Both X and Z. There we go. Okay. So, what we have here is an object that seems like probably this may be able to hold the same amount of water in it as this original size object here, okay? So that's really the true essence of squash and stretch, alright? We've got this object that's a certain size, looks like it could hold a certain volume. This object is roughly capable of holding the exact same volume as this. It's just a squashed down, deformed version, alright? This is wrong, this is just shrinking, okay? So this is just getting smaller and smaller and clearly cannot hold the same amount of water as the original shape. This as well cannot hold the same amount, okay? So, so why is this important? Why do we need this squashing rather than shrinking things? And really it's to create some realistic motion when we're animating, okay? So when you have a character or something, you don't want them to shrink ever, of course. You want them to look like they're staying the same size, but you do want them to squash and stretch a little bit, especially cartoons, okay? Whenever they're moving, you know, your muscles are going to change shape. Different parts of your body as well are going to deform as you're moving around, right? But they won't lose mass, okay? So it's very important to understand the difference. So once we kind of have that principle, we'll go ahead and apply a simple squash and stretch animation to this sphere, alright? This one that's still pretty normal looking. Now I'm just going to move the sphere right here up above my plane, okay? And before I go too far with this, I'm going to freeze my transformations. We'll go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. Alright, so over here I should see all zeros and ones in scale, okay? That just gets my animation ready for being animated. Now I'm also going to, the cube here is actually pretty big, so it's kind of covering up my little sphere. Alright, I'm gonna make that plane a lot bigger, and I'll actually move my sphere over here so you can kind of see what's going on. I'll freeze the transformations again now that I've moved it. Okay, there we go. So I'm gonna start at frame 1 here. Alright, and I'm just going to go ahead and set a key for Translate Y. Key selected. And I'll also set a key for scale X, Y, and Z. Okay? Right there, frame 1. Now, at frame 12, I'll have my little ball come down and hit the ground. Okay? It can help to look at this in other views so that I can kind of see how I'm doing with the ground there. Just lift this up just a little bit so that it's just touching the ground. And I'm also going to move my pivot point at this point, alright? Because if I scale it down and squash it right now, you can see it's going to lift up off the ground. Okay, it's coming towards this center point here. Alright, so I don't want that. I want this to stay on the ground. So I can actually move my scale tool using the D key and the V key, alright? So that's D as in dog and V as in vertex, alright? Then I can just grab this little yellow handle and left click and drag down to the bottom here, okay? It may help sometimes to look at this from the inside. Make sure you get your handle right there on the center, on the bottom. Now for something like a cube, you wouldn't have to worry about that so much. You would really just need to get it to any one of those bottom corners, okay, to achieve the same effect. So for this, now that I've moved my scale handle, now you can see the bottom sticks to the floor, alright? Same thing here with the cube. Just like that, alright? So I'm going to squash this down. But of course, right now, since I haven't scaled it out in X and Z, I've effectively shrunk it. Okay, so don't forget about that. We'll need to adjust X and Z values, make them larger to account for the smaller Y value to retain that mass. And then we'll go ahead and key these again. Key my Translate Y, and I'll also key my scale. Okay. Then for frame 24, it's going to be very simple. We're just going to put these the Y value back to 0, and the scale values back to 1. Okay, 1, 1, and 1. That's going to give it its original shape back. Right? That's why we froze our transformations when we started, okay, so that we can easily come back to this exact position and shape. And then I'll just key those again. There we go. Okay, so let's look at our animation now. Okay, looks a little weird, right? You can see the ball is starting to squash down before we actually hit the ground there, and that's not so good. So we can adjust that using our graph editor. We come to Window, Animation, Graph Editor. This is a really powerful tool for you to use to help you change your animation very easily without using a lot of keyframes, okay? So if we take a look here, adjust our scale. Okay, we're not really concerned with translate right now. We're just concerned with the fact that the ball is squishing in scale before it hits the ground. It's really pretty long and difficult to kind of see these curves that are going on. Okay, they're all thinned out. So if you're on a Mac, you can hold Command, Shift, and then right mouse button, click and hold and drag. Okay, like this, left and right. If you are on a PC, it's very similar. It's just going to be Control, Shift, right mouse, click and drag, left and right. And we can just zoom in, just like we always do in the scene window here. Same controls for that. And now you can see, we can really see these curves a lot better and a lot clearer. Okay? So, basically anywhere you're seeing a curve, that's where you're seeing some kind of change in shape or speed, you know, depending on what you're looking at. So for scale, we're seeing changes in shape happening here, all right? So if you see a horizontal line, that's going to be no change occurring. Anywhere you see any kind of diagonal or curved line, there's some change happening there. So obviously we don't want our scale to change at all until it actually hits the ground, okay? And we can do that pretty quickly just by marquee selecting these first frames, right? Right here on frame 1. This is frame 1 here. And just hitting this tool right here, okay? It's called Step Tangent. And that will change these instantly to something that kind of looks like stairs, alright, when you have a lot of them. But for now it just looks like mostly like a flat line. Okay, so you can see now everything's changed to a horizontal line, meaning there's no change in scale whatsoever happening here. And then all of a sudden at frame 12, it will suddenly shift to these squash values. So let's watch that happen. Boom, there's the squash. And then because these are still curved, it will still very gradually change back to its original shape. All right? Boom. Now, that's okay, but actually, you know, probably right about here, the ball would probably stretch a little bit, or at least return to its original shape. So it's not going to take that long to return to this nice round shape, okay? So I'm going to take all the way up to here. So it's going to happen much faster. So what we'll do here is add a little stretch, all right? To do a stretch, it's pretty much the opposite of what we did for the squash, okay? We'll take this, and for our value, we'll put something larger than 1 in here, okay? So we'll put maybe 1.2. That's probably a little small. Let's try 1.3, okay? And of course, if we scale this up to make up for that volume displacement, we need to scale X and Z down this time, okay? So I'm going to take these down. There we go. And we'll key just the scale this time, right? We're not really too concerned with translate right now. So we can see, there we go. Nice little bounce, alright? One more thing that can help this animation look a little snappier is going to be, if we take a look at translate here. Now, because we were working with scale, our translate loop looks pretty squished in. Again, just Command or Control Shift, right click and drag to stretch that back out again so you can see a little better. One thing that'll work really well for this particular animation is to make this bounce nice and crisp. Okay, so because what's happening right now is basically the closer to horizontal these curves are, the slower the movement, alright? And the closer to vertical, or the deeper the slope, the faster the movement that is happening, alright? So what's happening right now is this ball is starting to slowly fall. It's speeding up, speeding up, speeding up, speeding up, and as it comes to the bottom of this curve here, you can see it's becoming horizontal again. So it's actually slowing down, okay? So slowly falling, speeding up, and then slowing down before it hits the ground. And then slowly coming back up, speeding up, and slowing down at the top here, okay? So obviously we know that things do not slow down just before they hit the ground. So let's kind of make this curve a little better, okay? So it's speeding up all the way until it hits the ground, okay? And then bouncing back up very quickly, and then just only slowing down as it reaches the top of that arc and gravity begins to take effect, all right? So to do this, we can grab this middle handle here, okay? This is keyframe 12 on translate Y, all right? And I'm just marquee selecting, just clicking and dragging to grab that. Now we have these little handles on either side. We can come to edit, and we can use our transformation tools, move keys tool, okay? Now we're not ready really to move this yet, okay? Because at the moment, if we try to move this, you can see there's no way really to make this curve any sharper. It's still very fluid and very curvy. So in order to sharpen this up, we need to kind of break this curve in half, right, and be able to manipulate both sides individually, all right? So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just grab that, okay? We can press this button right here called Break Tangents. Once we do that, one of the handles will be blue and one will be pink, okay? Now when we click and drag to select a handle, and then click and drag again to move, we can move both sides individually. So now what we can do is have this nice slow movement and then speeding up, speeding up, speeding up, speeding up, all the way up until it hits the ground, okay? And then it can speed back up again, alright, as it bounces, and then slow down as it comes to the top of its arc here, okay? So let's check that out one more time. It's a subtle difference, but our eyes are kind of trained for that natural movement, so it will help a lot, okay? So just keep all those things in mind when you're doing squash and stretch. Make sure that you are accounting for mass and volume of an object, and make sure that it's not shrinking, alright? And also make sure that it's not floating through the ground, alright, at any point. That's it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions about anything we went over today. Thanks for watching, and happy animating!